Hello, good evening, welcome to Upfront. This obviously is a week for promoting and pushing press freedom. One man who is a stalwart in that particular department or that particular field is our guest today. He's His Excellency because in perhaps the latter life of after doing a lot of journalism, he became an ambassador to Namibia specifically not long ago. His Excellency Alhaji Abdul Rahman Harunata, you're welcome.
Thank you very much, Raymond. It's an honor.
I hope you are doing well this day.
Well, trying to grow old gracefully.
that's an interesting development.
No, it's true. I tell people that in 3 years' time I'm going to be 70, and people don't believe it.
Yeah, it's shocking to see. Yeah, you don't look half the age that people propose. You're actually supposed to be. Now, let's look back a little bit because it's important that this conversation is had under the very circumstances that we find ourselves. You've been editor and publisher of so many newspapers, and went right from GNA through to the New Times Corporation, through to the Spectator, till the Accra Daily Mail Times, and all of that. I would beg of you to take us back to how we were fostered into the periods of with the repeal of the newspaper licensing law somewhere around 1991, how our media space became what it is today.
Okay, let me put things in perspective. I edited The Statesman, and then I had a magazine before that called the Imagine magazine, which was ahead of its time. And then, of course, I did the Accra Mail, Accra Daily Mail. But with the Ghana News Agency, I served on the board. Okay. And then with Ghanaian Times too, I served on the board. Yes, and I also served on the board of the National Commission on Culture. And then I also served on the board of the Temawal Refinery. And then I became an ambassador. So it's a full public service record, which I'm very proud and grateful for doing.
Yeah. The question about, it was difficult in the 80s. It was a tough war, but you prevailed together with others. What were the circumstances that led to the repeal of that newspaper, what they call it, licensing law?
I think a lot of the credit is given to us, the practitioners at that time, but much of it also goes to the citizens, because the citizens of this country had had enough of those militaristic years. So it was a combination of the efforts by the, we'll call them the martyrs, like the late founder of the Free Press, and others like the late George Nakin. There were so many of them. And then the efforts of people like Kofi Kumsin, who founded the Ghanaian Chronicle, my colleague Cabral Ble-Ame here, who was very, very active. In fact, he was the driving force behind modernizing Ghanaian journalism. So all of these people put in that basket, plus the citizens of this country, decided that freedom of the media is what would move this country. It wasn't easy. Yes. Yeah, it wasn't easy. That was the period of the culture, so-called culture of silence, because the military diktats of the time meant that you couldn't publish freely. So at that time, if you notice, sports newspapers became very popular, even if it was just 1 or 2 pages. And then in between the sports stories, people like Kweku Baku, the late Tommy Thompson, and co were able to weave in political stories. So it was exciting, but it was also frightful because you didn't know what could happen to you. But the repeal of the newspaper licensing law followed closely at the heels of the 1992 Constitution, which were promulgated. And so media censorship had no place in the Constitution. So so that law had to go. It was a very, very exciting time for us, and you saw so many newspapers. Almost every morning you got up, there would be a new title on the newsstands.
Yes. A new people springing up, enjoying the most recent found freedom.
They were like children, as they say in the proverbial candy store. were all over the place. Yes, of course, it wasn't always quality. Few were quality. A lot of it was just pugnacious. Well, if you could hit wherever you hit. So that was the disposition then. Now, but we've moved on.
Okay. Now, interesting. I want you to recount for me your worst experience in the field of journalism.
Well, my worst experience was when I got handcuffs on my wrists from about 11 a.m. to about 5 p.m. when I had been sentenced. And my wrists had gotten sore by the time I was put in my cell in Sawam. It was terrible. It was bewildering. I mean, you can't imagine what it means to be handcuffed. I mean, a criminal. You've just been sentenced to go to jail because of what you've written in a newspaper. And then it wasn't even for any criminal offense. It wasn't criminal libel. It was this other one, they call it contempt of court.
I see.
Yeah, the court set us free, but the one who wanted us to go to jail had power to show, moved it to the appeal court, and they said we're in contempt of the court. That said it wasn't, we were not in contempt. So we were jailed. But having said that, it was a good experience. The Arabs...
Which year was this yesterday?
Look, I've even forgotten. It was 1980-something or 1990-something. I've put it so much behind me that
yes,
I can't even put the date, but it's in the records. It's in the public records.
So to be clear, this incident was, you were hauled before a court.
Yes.
That you were in contempt of the court.
Yes.
And the court set you free.
Yes. And the lady, the wife of the then head of state, insisted that we were in contempt. And people don't normally appeal contempt, but then she appealed. And then she got a pound of flesh, but life has since moved on.
Okay, so you were in jail for how long?
For 1 month, one terrible month.
One month?
One terrible month.
You described it as terrible. It must be a very terrible experience in Sawam.
In Sawam, they transferred me to Akuse later.
I see, you were
they transferred. In Sawam, if you can get good company, it's like a school. Yeah, the cells are there. It has a big compound. You can play football. It was well constructed. Yeah, but a place like Akuse is just a small prison which used to be a warehouse. You know, that area used to be a waterway and where goods were carried on the river. So there were a lot of these warehouses dotted around there. So then Akuse prison is just a warehouse. It's very claustrophobic, very, very claustrophobic.
Okay.
But,
so those comparably a more terrible experience compared to Sawam. Yeah.
In Sawam, yes. Your freedom has been taken away from you. That is terrible enough. Yeah, and if you don't have someone to feed you, it's terrible. I mean, our prisoners are not treated well at all. There is some food they call manpower and zontoli. It's just terrible. You can't even imagine that we are giving people such things to eat. So it's terrible. Don't ever think of going to prison, whoever it is.
Oh, well, that's interesting. I have no plans of doing so. Anyway, now, so this was the beginning of the Fourth Republic.
Yeah.
Generally, how was the practice of journalism at the time?
At the time, I must say, we were also a little bit, as I described it earlier, like kids in the candy store. It was all over. We've just gotten this freedom. The newspaper license law had been repealed. And people were writing. In fact, people didn't even know that if you published a letter as an editor, you are liable. So people had gone into this thinking you could just write anything. So there was a lot of naivety, ignorance, so which got a lot of people into trouble. They did not understand the practice of journalism as it is. And it is because you can't blame them. Our constitution is very clear. Anybody can establish any
Yeah.
media. So you don't have to go to school, you don't have to go to journalism school. Once you feel you can establish a newspaper, a radio station, the Constitution allows you. So a lot of people who were not exactly quite well educated, well, started going into this. But if you ask me, maybe what I'm going to say may be objectionable to some people, but I think journalism is such that if you don't have a first degree, you should not consider going into journalism.
Really?
Yeah, because journalism demands so much from the practitioner. That is because so much is also placed on your shoulders, as informing people. So there's so much on your
very huge
shoulders.
responsibility.
A very huge responsibility. So you can't do that with ignorance and lack of some appreciable level of education. That, I think, it's a problem.
I mean, the early years, the kids in the candy store years, was there any specific experience that you regret when you look back and say, no, I mean, I really got this wrong and ought to have done things differently?
Oh, there were many things I got wrong. Many things I got wrong. For example, checking of our facts was not de rigueur. You just get a story and you just go straight and do it. I'll give you an example. There was a police officer who had gone on retirement. He was living in some village in the western region. Then a big policeman, in fact, he was then the head of the police public relations, came to me and said that the man was terrorizing people in the western region and gave me the story.
The source was a very concrete source.
Exactly.
A big policeman.
A big policeman. So I used it. Oh, after about 2, 3, 4 weeks, this man had come from wherever he was. He was a broken man because of the story. He was terrified. Your name in a newspaper that you are holding a weapon and threatening people. He came. I mean, it broke my heart.
Okay.
So I did the right thing, and I put a retraction and for him. So those kinds of things in the early days were rampant. Yeah, and then I'll tell you this one too. I won't mention name. A very big publisher was given a story by a big politician, and the politician said to him, "But this is a story, but please cross-check before using it." His answer was, "Oh, what is there to cross-check? We'll use it." So these kinds of things were quite rampant in those days. So we were getting into trouble, and the late Busumchi Sam, who was an MP, made quite a name for himself by suing us almost on a weekly basis.
I see.
Yes. He was just the MP
he
for
was a check. He was a check on the Ghanaian media at the time.
He was suing us almost every week. Yeah. So those were some of the things.
At that time, there was criminal and seditious liability.
No, that was, let me see. No, the Kufuor administration removed that one.
I'm talking about the early years.
The early years, yes, it was.
Okay.
Yeah,
no.
People like George Nakin suffered from the criminal libel aspect of the criminal code.
So this is newfound freedom, which is more likely to be abused, and also you having to clear up all the areas that demanded some clarity in this particular case. How was the relationship of the media then with the head of state, George Rawlings?
Former President Rawlings, he's my in-law, so I should be careful what I say about him. His mindset was not the mindset of a Democrat. So we should know that up initio. He came on the scene from a coup d'etat. He was angry because of things he thought that were not going well in the country. He got his cronies, they did a coup, they succeeded. Yeah, so he came with that mindset. So we should understand him from that angle, that he was intolerant. He was media intolerant, pure and simple.
Okay.
Yeah, he was media intolerant, pure and simple. And a lot of the abuses like shit bombing and so on took place under his watch. So
things that the police said they would investigate, but of course, I mean, they didn't get anywhere.
Yeah, Yeah. So that was his mindset. But he was compelled to accept the liberal constitution we had worked into place. And he tried over the years. By the time he became a full civilian president, he learned to tolerate what he found offensive. For someone like me, I still, what's the word? I still marvel that I was able to get away with so much, because I had a column in the Statesman called Taking Issue, and it was a weekly critique about him and his government. But apart from them sending me to jail on contempt, by and large, I was left untouched. Others too went through that.
Was there a difference between the early years, 1992, 93, 94, compared to when he had to be re-elected in 96 and actually come back?
Yeah, it was virtually the same. Like I was saying, I mean, it's his mindset. Even up till now, right now that he's on retirement, you can still see from his body language that he's training at the leash to do whatever, to say whatever.
Okay.
So that's him. Well, we've come this far with him, and luckily the Ghanaian people have decided on a liberal constitution, and that's been working. So for the last how many years, 1992, we've tried to do our best with it.
Okay, so we transitioned from Jerry Rawlings to John Kufuor's period.
Yeah.
The 2000 election.
Yeah.
This was the first time there was a turnover in our history in the Fourth Republic.
Yeah.
How was that election, the period we are talking about in this case, for journalism practice and also for media coverage?
Wow, President Kufuor would be recorded in our history as the person under whose administration that the golden years of modern Ghanaian journalism started blossoming. Because when he came in, he didn't waste time at all in abolishing the criminal libel section of the criminal code. And then his body language was media friendly, very, very media friendly. And he did not countenance the media being bashed. I could say President Kufuor preferred to err on the part of media freedom than on chastising the media.
Okay.
You see, if you remember the Giselle Yazi episode,
yes,
it must have been terrible. No head of state could have slept over that incident.
During that period.
Yeah, but he went through it. I don't remember any journalist ever arrested or beaten, but it was traumatic for him and his family.
Perhaps not by state institutions, but Raymond Achar insists that he was on several occasions intimidated. At some point, there were attacks on him, his car, and other things were vandalized.
Yes, there may be such cases. I'm not saying there were no such cases. There may be such cases of people, lone wolf attempts to get at you. After all, I also had a death threat, in fact, death threats before, but I've just decided, look, to assume that it wasn't institutional. But as a practicing journalist, you get some of these things. People who don't know you may insult you and threaten you. Yeah. So Raymond, yes, was he talking about his Chronicle days or?
Yes, of course.
Okay. Well, there were such things, I must say, but the golden years, I insist, started from then.
The year 2000.
Yeah, when Kufuor came to power. And then it went throughout, and unfortunately, President Mills didn't live long. But if you ask me, the golden years of Ghanaian journalism, from Kufuor to John Mahama, those were the golden years.
I'll come for further explanation of this, because even though there was repeal of the criminal and seditious libel, we left civil libel.
Yeah. Yeah, but that is something that is extant in many jurisdictions. Yeah, civil libel or defamation laws are all over the place, and even in the most advanced, so-called advanced democracies, they often apply it. And newspapers and media houses that infringe on other people's rights and liberties get such heavy fines. Sometimes
there were concerns about the fines and how heavy they were, sometimes in the position to cripple newspapers, which were not really very, what do you call it, big institutions at the time.
Yeah, but those are the things that can be used to stifle media freedom, yeah, especially in these parts. Because our media houses here, newspapers, even the electronic media, don't make that much money. As for the newspapers, I was involved. We didn't make any penny. It was a hand-to-mouth existence, and you found yourself every day praying that you could even get just one advert to pay maybe for your printing. It never came. So when heavy fines were imposed, it just was meant to cripple you. But what I can say is that a number of times those heavy fines that were imposed were never chased by the people who won those reliefs. So we just plodded on.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Now, you lump the space together, but I want a more defined space. From John Kufuor, then Professor Mills came in. Professor Mills was also of the stock of the NDC.
Yeah.
I mean, except you wanted to separate the man, George Rollins, from the NDC when it comes to their approach to dealing with media freedoms in the country. Was there a difference between Professor Mills and Jerry Rollins when it comes to leading a party that was seen to be somewhat not friendly to the media?
Absolutely. Professor Mills was a different person from Rawlings and from President Rawlings. And the buck often stops with the, in fact, it does stop with the leadership. A party may be in power. If you know even the history of the NDC, initially it was a revolutionary party, but later the party did away with that and adopted social democracy. Okay. So someone like me, I'm very comfortable with social democracy. Yeah, you don't have to bring individuals' name in. I would like to see a social democratic system in place. So I'm very comfortable with it. So between 2000 and the time President Mahama left office, like I'm saying, the media had its golden years of freedom. Yeah, there was not much intimidation, even though there were occasional explosions with people near some of these heads of state. But in general, the body language of these three heads of state towards the media was one of friendliness and tolerance.
President late J.M. Mills and also President John Mahama. But it is instructive that was in 2015 that for a very long time a journalist was killed. This was one Abanga.
Those are some of the dark spots.
Are they isolated incidents?
Yeah, they are. But there was this other journalist in Kumasi who was killed. Exactly before. Yeah, I want to believe those are lone wolf attacks, and like Swale's case, I can't comment on that one because that's a different kettle of fish altogether. But then Ghana is not known for murdering of journalists. It's not our...
There's one development though. President John Dramani Mahama was seen to be, of course, he even said that he was, in the media space because he's a communicator and had actually done some work in that direction previously. But there was an incident that even the Media Foundation for West Africa flagged. It was his aide, Stan Dogbe, virtually destroying the electronic gadget of a journalist in this particular case. Indeed, according to the Media Foundation for West Africa, it was one of the reasons why we were downgraded from what used to be a very free media space to a partly free media space. And if you check the Freedom House, what they call it, assessment,
Index,
yes, that was when we actually did a switch for a very long time.
Yeah, that issue has played for a long time. And in fact, it's still even playing. It's still dogging President Mahama. But like I'm saying, that was a lone wolf kind of thing.
Okay.
I was not in the country. I was out there as an ambassador. But I saw the protests, the petition to the president signed by about 70-something journalists.
Yeah.
So that one is there. It's a lone wolf thing. But if you look at the general ambience, the general atmosphere, it was a very, very friendly atmosphere, and it was conducive to media work. If Mr. Dogbe did what he did for whatever reason, I want to put it as a lone wolf attack.
There's a question that's important to me at this time, and we basically have done that, but I need you to put them in proper perspective for me.
Okay.
The generalist periods were experimental periods.
Yeah.
John Kufuor, says the golden age.
Yeah.
And this golden age, you think, extends to the period of John Dramani Mahama?
Absolutely, I think so.
Now, let's put the spotlight on the period of President Akufo-Addo coming into office. I'm sure you would know that he has always been touted, and he stated categorically, human rights lawyer, a person who believes in the protection of rights. He's made a statement categorically before that even though the media sometimes may get it wrong, he believes that a free environment for media practice is what is the ideal thing to do all the time. Indeed, he's also stated that the repeal was under his own leadership as Attorney General of the People's Republic of Ghana, and that you cannot say that a man of his caliber would infringe on media freedom. His history works against the reality for you.
I don't know. I don't want to sound cynical. There's this adage of beware of, is it sheep wearing or wolves wearing sheep's clothing? But I'm just being cynical.
Wolf in sheep clothing.
Clothing, but I'm being cynical. Forget about it. Yeah, but when you look at the record, yes, we pressed for it. It wasn't a one-man effort. We pressed for the freedom of the media. Okay. And it was President Kufuor who, more than any other person, who worked towards it. If President Kufuor didn't want it, he was the boss, he was the chief executive. His Attorney General could bring it to him, and then he would say, no, leave it, leave it, leave it. So when we are discussing these things, let's put...
so the repeal should be seen more as a credit to the then head of state.
Yeah, the incumbent.
The Attorney General.
It's an executive presidency. So ministers do not decide for the president.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a president that would accept or initiate or take certain decisions. And that is why sometimes we are being told that in Ghana, the president wields so much power.
Okay.
Yeah. But if the president didn't agree with it, there was no way this thing could have happened. So, and we had the chance to interact with President Kufuor. That's the point I'm making. Okay. President Kufuor was quite approachable. So we had the chance to interact with him on a number of these things, and we saw where his mindset was.
There was clearly an intent to do that.
Exactly. Yeah, it very clearly. I don't know about others, but I would occasionally talk to him. All of us, he would open up his space for us. So we knew it would happen. In fact, we knew the moment he won the election, we knew it would happen. Yeah. So, well, once a minister has been there, and it is its ministry which is in charge of such things, and it's come on, it doesn't matter. You can take the praise. That for me is not an issue. You can take the praise. But I just think we should be careful when we are trying to be to aggrandize ourselves in certain areas.
We'll take a break. Okay. After the break, we'll put a spotlight on the administration of President Nana-Dankwa Akufo-Addo and find out how have we pushed media freedoms under his tenure. After this break. You welcome back. This is Upfront. My name is Raymond Alkwa. My guest today is a man that's lived through the Ghanaian media space. He's gone to jail for it. He's actually been published in newspapers. He's served on boards. He understands the space, perhaps more than many people in this republic. And of course, when he's approaching 70, reflections are the things that you get from a man of his nature and standard. He is His Excellency, of course, because he was ambassador to Namibia
and Botswana, actually.
And
I had
Botswana.
concurrent accreditation.
Oh, okay, that's interesting to know. But, of course, I mean, my guess is the Alhaji Harunata, and there's Abdul Rahman that some people sometimes don't know that you are also called anyway. Now, the conversation we've had so far is to go through the times for people who did not live through it, get to appreciate where we have come from when it comes to media freedom, promotion, and the protection of same, and the current environment we find ourselves, how we got here in the first place. We've talked about the Rawlings period, we talked about the John Kufuor period you call the Golden Age. We also talked about the J.A. Mills times, and also the times when President John Mahama was president on 2016. Now, we started a conversation about President Nana Dankwa Akufo-Addo. When he was becoming president, what was your expectation of him in terms of press freedom?
Let me make, is it a caveat? Whatever it is at the beginning. I may be the wrong person to answer questions regarding the current incumbent because I didn't vote for him. I didn't expect much of him. So my fears seem to be confirmed over and over. So perhaps...
Sorry, let's be clear.
Okay.
You're talking about fears.
Yeah.
It suggests to me a detraction from what was known to many in this country.
Yeah.
So what were these fears, and specifically related to press freedom?
Yeah, but the fears include one which is very common to intolerant leadership.
Really?
I could tell, and I knew that he had a streak of intolerance.
You knew him?
Yeah.
Very well.
I worked with him for 6 years as the editor of the Statesman, for which he was the publisher.
Okay.
Yeah. And after, that's one thing. And then also I was close enough in his political rise to be able to make certain assessments. But like I'm saying, not voting for someone is not a crime, which I didn't vote for him, and I think everybody knows about that. And you are asking me whether
you expected, because this is a man that the people of this republic know to be a human rights lawyer. He's gone to court. He's shown the evidence of same in court. Dr. Ekubebe is very clear in his mind that he's the man who led my case. So he's fought for freedoms and the space that we are currently enjoying in this case. He's one who went to the Parliament of the Republic of Ghana to actually ask for a repeal of the criminal libel law.
Yes,
that is history of.
When I was getting into trouble as the editor of the Statesman, and the Bushumtish Sam was sending us to jail almost every week, he was defending us.
Okay.
So I'm not saying he wasn't doing all these things, but I'm just saying that was my assessment.
So even with the publicly known record of Nana Dankwa Akufo-Addo, you didn't expect him to be...
Yeah, I didn't expect much of him. Everywhere. It's a basket. You see, you are telling me to just remove one thing from the basket.
Yes.
I'm just looking
You generally were not expectant of
much out of him.
Promoting freedoms of the media? Or general freedoms in all of this?
Yeah. The intolerance, I know the intolerance would affect all these things, whether it is the relationship with people who are in the so-called opposition, whether it's the media, whether it's people he just doesn't like. I made the caveat that I'm probably not the right person to answer this kind of question, because I would have to bear my heart out. And
to be fair, he was not presented to the people of this republic as an intolerant person.
Well, that is what was not presented. But does that mean that that streak was not there? No.
Okay. Now, let's talk about his record. From February 2017 to somewhere around June 2019 this year, there's been almost 41 different incidents of media attacks in various forms, 21 physical attacks on specific people. There's been a killing under his watch, and of course, when he's president of this republic, there's been attacks on media houses. There has also been specific threats, and the Media Foundation for West Africa records a single incident of torture in this century under his presidency. Were these things that you thought could never happen under him?
I read that. That's a very clever question. There were things, these were things I didn't expect should happen, but I knew could happen. You see, so if you look at some of these things you've cited, why did Ayawaso West Wagon happen under his watch? How come those thugs went to spring their colleagues from a court in Kumasi, and then the Attorney General entered a case of non-prosecutor, whatever they say? How come the compendium of these things is just big? You can't just tell. So the record for me is not it's not a glowing one. I keep telling people who listen to me and laughing, I said that, oh, I didn't vote for him, but I was also rather apprehensive in a certain way that he will come and do so well that I'll be so ashamed and embarrassed, and I'll have to go.
He'll prove you wrong.
Exactly. So I had that fear that, okay, but what if he comes and he's such a shining star? What would you do? And I said to myself, I'll have to lick my vomit, that kind of stuff. But then I was praying that I wouldn't have to lick my own vomit. So I would,
not for him it's to the collective good of the state.
No, I'm not saying that.
Yes.
I'm just saying that I was praying I didn't have to lick my own vomit.
Okay.
No, I wasn't wishing him ill. I wasn't wishing him ill at all. Yeah.
Now, let me bring this part to it because it's important that we put it in that particular perspective. The understanding many have had, and you, if you compare from Jerome up to this time, I want you to be able to, if not rank order, single out periods you think media freedoms have deteriorated the most.
Well, I would still say the Jerome period and now. In the middle there, like I keep saying, unfortunately, President Mills didn't live long enough for us to have seen how things would have gone. But actually, within that period, Kufuor to John Mahama, I think things didn't deteriorate. I think things, there may be an infringement here and there. Like you mentioned, the Stan Dogbe's case. Yeah. These lone wolf aberrations. But generally, within those periods, and I'm not being political, saying President Kufuor, President Mills, and President Mahama, these three presidents, for me, stand up as tolerant people. And so the media could be tolerated. Yeah. I thought that this period would have seen the blossoming of media. Why even go and arrest someone who is working on the web, this modern Ghana thing? Why close Joy, I'm saying Joy, sorry. Why close
Radio Gold.
Radio Gold and the others.
XYZ.
Why would...
But it was established that they were in clear violation of specific, what they call it, NCA rules.
That is why I'm saying that a government should err more on the side of media protection than punishing the media. That's my position. Even if they erred, they shouldn't have been closed. They were performing a service which many other stations are not performing because they were given a viewpoint. They were given a viewpoint away from what some stations are not given because of the plurality of our politics. So you close it down, you are denying a section of people in this country from getting alternative information. So better err on that side than go on and say you are insisting on making the law work. If you want to do that, there are many media houses in this.
Can we separate the leadership of the authority, in this case, that's the NCA, from what would have been the position of the executive president of the republic?
No, we can't, because the appointment is done by the executive president, because it's he who gives the appointments based on all sorts of things, and we want to hear what he has to say about all these things. There's too much silence with the happenings here. There's just too much silence. Yeah. So it cannot be a golden age, if you ask me, this period. Maybe it will change between now and election 2020, maybe, and I'll eat my words. But now I cannot say it's part of the golden age I was talking about.
Could it be that you are biased against him?
But at the,
yes,
at the very beginning,
and that's probably is clouding your judgment.
At the very
yes, on this particular assessment.
At the very beginning, I told you that I didn't vote for him. I didn't think much could come out of him.
And that doesn't matter.
As an adult, that's my assessment.
I am expecting you to be able to objectively define the space and say, this is what has happened, that's why I believe so.
Yeah, but we've talked about so many of them, like the arrest of the journalists, modern Ghana people, Radio Gold. How would someone like Owusu Bempah, is it Ohene Bempah, his main man, his main spiritual guru, could actually go and virtually attack a radio station?
Oh, the Prophet Owusu Bempah.
Yeah.
I see.
Yeah. How could he
go?
Yes,
he went to...
to XYZ. We all saw it. He was berserk, like not a man of God. We saw all these things, but there was no follow-up.
So media freedoms are threatened now?
Yeah.
You believe so?
I believe so, very much so. Because if someone like Ohene Bempah, I keep calling him Owusu Bempah, can actually go to a radio station and threaten, and Owusu Bempah is supposed to be his main spiritual guru, and we didn't hear him dissociating himself from the action of his spiritual guru, what do you expect us to say? We didn't hear not a single word to even say, no, even if the station has offended you, that's not how to go about it. Not a word. So these things, when you add them up, you realize that the media freedom right now is more under threat than before.
Very seriously under threat, or just inching towards what could be serious?
Well, whatever it is, we've seen these examples. If Radio Gold opens tomorrow, yeah, we'll begin to see the change. If we see them stopping the torture, because I was shocked when I heard that the modern Ghana guys were tortured. Torture in Ghana's history, it's antediluvian. It was years ago. Now we don't do these things. And the young man insists they were tortured. No, that cannot be good news. One torture is bad enough to affect all of us.
I see. Now, the understanding that many put to some of these incidents and the happenings is that this is an age also of irresponsible journalism.
Yeah, we'll come to that.
Springs off every corner. People who have no proper qualifications, or people who are deliberately malign and mischievous in their reports, maligning people left, right, center. Could it be the reason for the current environment you allude to?
Yeah, but it cannot justify torture. It cannot. It cannot justify murder. It cannot justify the denial of the freedom of expression. Yeah, we are not perfect, even though now I'm retired from the profession. But who says the media is perfect? There was a British journalist, editor, who was quoted as saying that relations between the media and the government is getting worse and worse every day, but under no circumstance should it improve.
It should not improve.
Yeah, that was what a what a British journalist once said, that the relationship between the media and the government is deteriorating every day, but under no circumstance should it improve.
Now, there's a question also about what we can do to make sure that the environment is safer. What can specifically the government do?
Well, we have the National Media Commission.
Yeah.
It should be resourced. For me, for as long as I've known the National Media Commission, it's always been starved of resources. When I was editing the Accra Mail, they used to come to us for free copies because they didn't even have money to buy newspapers that they could analyze. Yeah, and I know that there were times when even the allowances of commissioners would be delayed. That is a very, very important component. We should be able to resource them, not just the money to for the little recurrent expenditures, but for capital investment, so that they'll be able to monitor radio stations. They will have an array of instruments and equipment which are available, but they are just sitting there. You go to the NMC office, it's one of the pathetic public offices you can go to at the ministry. They are not getting any new things. There's just nothing there. So that's one thing. And then the second thing...
Even for the NMC, there's a concern about they really being like stooges of the current government, whatever, because of the kind of appointments that are made to the institution.
But that's the thing also about the NMC. It also comes under a lot of political pressure, because like you've just said, I mean, I can't add more to that. But that does not make it an irrelevant institution. We should just better it. And then the professional associations, GJA, Primpag, GIBA, and all these professional associations, they have to come together and insist on self-regulation. That's the way out for me.
Self-regulation.
Self-regulation. They should insist on it. I've just been appointed to the new board of the Primpag.
Okay.
And we are going to demand certain structures, you see, that would be able to bring the membership of the Primpag into line. By line, not mean acquiescence, but into doing the professional thing. I've always told the young journalists to look for Joseph Pulitzer's reason for establishing the Columbia School of Journalism. It's a small thing like that. I think he wrote it in 2011. I'm saying 2011, 1911, those years ago. It makes very interesting reading on why he thought journalism should be treated like other professions, like the doctors, like the accountants, and so on. Before then, well, journalists were just journalists. So when the Columbia School of Journalism was set up, it went straight into insisting on certain standards. Today, the Columbia School of Journalism is probably the topmost school of journalism in the world. So those are some of the things. Editors also must try to educate their young colleagues, ones. Because when I was here as an editor, I don't just edit a story. I'll let the reporters come and stand around me.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, you can ask them. They'll stand around, why this is not right, why this is not right. And then we do a story. By the time the story is done, they themselves agree that
they appreciate
that anyway. It's been polished. So these are some of the things we should put in place. But there's another one that we can't help. Most of the media houses belong to politicians, radio stations, newspapers. So they do the bidding of their political masters.
That's
so
true.
That also is a major problem.
Can we change it?
We can't, because
can we get independent people that will put money into certain establishment
well,
like that?
If really independent people can do that, that would begin to make the difference.
Can we make laws to restrict politicians from doing so?
No, then we are denying them their freedom of expression. That one.
But is that not where the difficulty really is?
It is.
We can't constrain them, and yet the space is predominated.
Yeah, it's a balancing act. The Fourth Republic is just how many years old? 20 years or something old. Once we keep at it, I'm sure later generations will keep adding, and...
Specifically, what can this government do differently?
Well, specifically, what can they do differently? I cannot tell. They were elected to do things for us all to benefit. So once they've been elected, they would have to work out the necessary strategies.
Do you expect the media environment to improve under President Akufo-Addo?
It just may, because of the pressure he is under now, he may now sit up and see that, look, things are not going well, and then start letting his people, maybe he's not even the one, but his people, to start modifying their attitude to the media. So maybe it will.
Last question.
Okay.
There's a recent conversation, and that conversation is about whether or not, as a media organization, the reaction of a Minister of State to an intern's call has become very topical. Some say it's disrespectful. Others say it can never happen that an intern will place a call to a minister to ask specific questions. And even before these questions are asked, the minister is insisting, I can't deal with an intern. If you are still that very active, bold journalist, what direction will you give on this matter?
An intern is a journalist, by all intents and purposes. It's just that they don't still yet have a certificate. So an intern, as part of his or her training, has the right to even call the president and ask him a question. An intern is an intern because it's part of his or her training. So for me, as an ambassador or former ambassador, for an intern to call me, I'll be very, very proud. I'll even let them come to my office. They come. Like I was telling you, when I was editor, that's how I used to deal with my subordinates here. And so the Accra Mail was very popular. Young journalists would say they heard that when they come here, they get this kind of treatment. So I think it's absolute nonsense for any minister to say a journalist, an intern, should not call them. That's arrogance. It's just like the other MP who was caught screaming that because he's an MP, he shouldn't be stopped when you are breaking the law. That Kade MP. So we should all calm down. The arrogance should reduce. The arrogance should reduce. Elected officers are not meant to lord over us. They are supposed to serve us. So the minister had no right. He's an ignorant person. He didn't know what he was saying. If any interns are listening to this interview, feel bold. Ask anybody any question you want, and they should answer you. If they don't answer you, do a story and say they didn't answer you. It's your right as an intern. It's part of your training.
His Excellency, I'm happy you give us some time in your office today, and we appreciate your time today.
Thank you.
We should be doing this more often.
Thank you.
Well, folks, that's where we end today's edition of Upfront. My name is Raymond Akwa. My guest was His Excellency Abdul Rahman Harunata.